Good morning, my admiral friend. I hope this finds you well. It's a gray day here, raining. Not as cold as it was yesterday, so that's a comfort. I'm trying to wake up a bit and just having some coffee, pipe, and the wifey is cooking up some stew. Traditionally, Sunday was always the day I would like hang out here and spend time with the wifey. Oh my goodness, back long ago, we had an entirely different kind of living situation at the time because we were doing different things. It's funny how stuff perpetuates. We've been living together for since 1996, and so that's 27 years, something like that. And it's funny, in that time, of course, your circumstances change a lot. So things we were doing because of like work schedules or something else, the work schedules change, but then we still have the habit. And that's a form of cozy. That's a form of comfy, I think. Rupert Sheldrake talks about this with morphogenic fields. I know you're familiar with the idea that the repetition of an event somehow reinforces it on a level that we can't directly perceive. Gets a little frighteningly Platonian there, but no, not really. Not really. Not my pal Rupert Sheldrake. Um, but yeah, there is something to be said for a repetition. Remember, we talked about grooves in our behavior, and that is a metaphor that the neuroscience has picked up with the idea of like ingraining or entraining memories into the physical structure of the brain. But again, every time you read another article that claims that they have quote unquote found where memory is quote unquote stored in the brain, then you get like when you and the thing is, in most of these articles, the headlines for them in the popular science magazines that you and I have readily access to, usually taken from one or two possible points. Whereas if you actually read the paper or the abstract at least, and then look in the journals for the responses, you see that very often these theories are problematic from one or another viewpoint. And looking at it from the point of view of Janesian psychology, and for that matter, the Aristotelian concept of the self, or psyche, rather than having a specific memory written down in our mind, what we have is a habitual performance of a certain series of thoughts. And again, this is something Janes pointed out. This has nothing to do with bicameralism. And this is one of the reasons I got interested in Janes, because he's a very, very good psychologist on other levels, especially with his ideas about consciousness. But as Janes points out, we don't really remember what actually happens. We remember a story we tell ourselves about what happened. Like going to the beach. You remember going to the beach. So you remember when you were going to the beach, and you'll think about cars and seeing yourself swimming, and there's like all the beach scenes, ice cream. That's not what you experienced. What you experienced was different kinds of temperature on your skin, the feel of sand under your feet, water splashing on you, a cacophony of sounds, gulls, people talking. You don't remember that. What you remember is a story we tell ourselves. So in that sense, at least that aspect of memory has to do with a process. This nostalgia is a product of the fact that this is a constantly evolving thing. So this argues against, simply from a psychological point of view, this argues against the idea that somehow a memory is quote unquote stored in the mind. Otherwise, we would be like, well, how a hypothetical robot would remember something. Rewind audio-visual tapes to such and such date, and you would replay all of your sensory information from that time. Or you'd be able to, in a more science fiction-y kind of a dumbing down, if you like, you could be sitting in a movie theater and replay everything that you saw through your eyes. Every time we do anything, we tend to, especially with memories, we focus on the visual stuff, occasionally the audio stuff, very occasionally the olfactory stuff. Although smell is the forbidden sense that can often call up hidden memories. But yeah, we tend to downplay all the fact that we are bombarded with all sorts of stimuli. And we have, especially as they say in Buddhism, 6 senses, including our mind. And there are aspects of our sensoria that we don't consciously comprehend. And in fact, that's probably a good thing. But more than just temperatures, I just felt a cool wind play across my face. But also we're being bombarded with electromagnetics, infrared, ultraviolet, sounds, smells, taste of pollen in the air. And you tend to tune that out, and you tend not to remember it. I'm not going to consciously remember the grain of the wood that I'm staring at right now. So again, the idea that memory is somehow inscribed in the brain irremovably doesn't really stand up to our lived experience of memory. Now, you can acquire reflexes. As Jane said, animals don't remember, they learn. And this is how we learn not to do certain things, like not touching a campfire. And this, in a sophisticated animal like us, can be, unfortunately, or fortunately as the case may be, extended up into higher levels of consciousness. So this makes us both very vulnerable to control from the outside, but also gives us the potential of a great deal of power if we can control this from the inside. And this is what Buddhism is really teaching us, how to get control of our own minds. And because this is the only way you can really end all the unnecessary suffering that you go through. Because, of course, the Buddha only taught two things, as he said. He taught suffering, and he taught the release from suffering, the ending of suffering, the stopping of suffering, if you like. And when you realize that suffering is coming from your mind, and then you realize you've got this incredibly powerful thing the mind is. I mean, just think about the placebo effect. It should be enough to make anybody step back and go, wow, this mind's powerful. Powerful stuff. So, yeah, you shouldn't let it go down the road without anyone at the wheel. And that's what we do when we allow certain aspects of ourselves, certain defilements, certain becomings take the wheel. Becomings often programmed by mass media or spiteful individuals or groups. We wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't even do that in one of these supposedly self-driving Teslas. We're not an AI, we're a regular eye. We have to get behind that wheel and make sure the car is steered in a good direction, or at least a skillful direction, which is a good direction, I think.